enough about you. Let's talk about Dominic Priori. Dom, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
It's about your 12th or 15th appearance on the Poker Party.
I don't know. I lost track already.
But you've even managed to appear on it when you moved to Omaha.
That's right, somehow.
Yeah, well,
you didn't manage to appear on it, though, that time.
That's right. I was going to go to Omaha last summer to appear on Dominic's installment of my show, but then my wife got sick on the way there, so we didn't do it. Welcome back to L.A. for a little while.
Okay, no problem.
And next to him and me, we got Paul Bodie.
Yeah.
Paul, it's nice to see you.
Well, it's nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm going to count up pretty soon. I'm going to say, like, this is your 100th show, 150th show, something.
Probably more than that.
Yeah, it's in
I
the
mean,
hundreds.
it's a lot of them.
It's in the hundreds.
Yeah.
All right, so I was explaining to a friend of mine, a Portuguese friend of mine, what the history of rock and roll was, because I could run this kind of like a class, but of course you guys aren't my students, you're my peers.
That's
so
right,
you
baby.
probably want to find
Don't
something.
you forget it.
You've all seen there are rock and roll classes being taught all over the country, and I'm not teaching one. That's why I want to show you really what I think about the history of rock and roll. People watch this show for historical information, and I'll loop it on the back of the book. Doesn't loop. Let me take a handheld mic here and start with the history of rock and roll. Isn't really all that long. It started really in the 50s, but some of the stuff that preceded it was pretty good too. Now, what we have here in the Fein history of rock and roll chart is 1945 to 1950. That was jump music, great stuff, wonderful period in American musical history. 50 to 55 was developing R&B. A lot of Atlantic records, a lot of real good records, a lot of great black stuff, 50 to 55. In 55, it was a very good year. Rock Around the Clock, name some more, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, all kinds of stuff. 56, even better. Elvis came out. So that's
Well, that's your opinion.
No, that's a fact.
Oh, okay.
1956 was real good. That was Elvis, Bill Haley, Little Richard, people like that.
Yeah.
57 was unbelievable year because that's when Elvis was still around. We had Jerry Lee Lewis, we had Little Richard. Everybody was swinging. That was the best year that ever was. Okay. In 58, things got sick. That was because of the encroachment of American Bandstand and a lot of Bobbies and Bobbies.
Flock of Bobbies.
Flock of Bobbies and Frankies.
Yeah.
So at that point, you can't really blame Dick Clark. You could. People do. For the pollution of the rock and roll that we all loved up till that point, because American Bandstand dictated what was heard, and much of it was from Philadelphia. Not that I hate Philadelphia. I think some pretty good people came from there.
But it was
like
garbage.
Bobby Rydell. He was good. I liked him. 59, rock and roll, of course, as we all know, was dead. So, rock and roll died in 59, not because of the Buddy Holly plane crash, which was coincident with its death. Buddy Holly was already over when he died anyways, because he was already doing Paul Anka songs and selling out to a kind of a Glenn Campbell kind of pop market at the time he expired. All right, now we go into the 60s. I'm going to have to get down here. 1960s, a little bit happened. 62 and 63, well, of course, that's when Phil Spector was around. A lot of great records. That's all that happened then. 64.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
64.
Wait a minute.
You'll have your time up here.
Oh, okay.
You'll have your time up here. 64,
Sorry, you're right.
64 was, of course, everybody's most momentous year. That was the big year for Motown. They had a lot of good records that year, even though I don't want to ever hear any of them again, thanks to Oldies Radio blasting Supremes and the Four Tops and Marvin Gaye in my face endlessly. So, good music, but overdone, and it should be buried for about 20 more years now, so we don't have to hear it anymore.
Thank you.
Okay, so 65 and 6, that was the year of Atlantic. That was when Aretha Franklin, Sam and Dave, people like that, made some really great records out of Muscle Shoals and, well, New York, other such places. Now, I guess they weren't, were they Muscle Shoals?
No, they were
yet
in
then?
Memphis, man.
They were in Memphis.
Muscle Shoals.
Okay, sorry. Memphis, by the way, don't forget, that was in 55, 6, and 7. That was the great Sun records. Now, 65 and 6, that was pretty much when rock and roll died again. And it came back in 76 with the Ramones. And the Ramones did some great stuff which inspired punk rock, which is irrelevant. But the Ramones were great. And in the 80s, well, we're getting down here. 80s was a pretty good time, actually, because, of course, it was good for me because I went and saw Jerry Lee Lewis. And I went and saw Clifton Chenier and people like that. But, in fact, the good music that was generated was the, I'll call it the Blasters, even though I don't mean the Blasters, but the Blasters type music that came out then, which was Blasters, Los Lobos, and lots of cool rockabilly bands revived. And then, because Dominic's here, because I believe in it, also 87 was a good year because the Brian Wilson came out. the Brian Wilson's, hello, the Brian Wilson's, I'm spelling like him, the Brian Wilson solo album came out. Now, that was a great record. That's pretty much the only thing besides the Blasters. Oh yes, the Gun Club album was quite good in about 81.
What about the Crawdaddies, Art?
The Crawdaddies, well, that's in your life, not mine. So pretty much we got here, the history, all the important landmarks of rock and roll are right here. Now, Dick, do you have any feelings about this? By the way, I want to introduce Dick Blackburn and want you to come up here and make yourself. Now, Dick, I've cited you in the past as being the most out-of-it person of my acquaintance.
Yeah.
Because when I had Al Cooper on the show a couple years ago, he had told me he produced various things, and one of the things he produced was a bird. What bird? Some bird.
Bird. Freebird.
Freebird, thank you. Freebird. Freebird, which he said, and you know, I produced this, and then I produced that, and then I produced Freebird. And I said, yeah. And he said, Art, you didn't respond at all. I mean, you know Freebird? I said, well, no. And he said, you know, it's the second biggest song in the history of American pop radio after Stairway